Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We got Nick Farabaugh on, and I want to talk to Nick about Omar Khan's history of free agent signings. Is there a systemic problem within the Steelers' pattern of signing free agents, or has he just not had the chance to have a big free agent splash yet because of the pools the Steelers have had? We'll talk about that, whether or not the Steelers can find their own version of Sam Darnold in free agency soon, and our final stars and skulls grades on the edge defenders. It's all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And a reminder, the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcasting network in the world. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh. He's back from PennLive.com. We love having Nick on the show. Nick, I was looking through free agency, and we're in that time of the year where it's the early part of the offseason. The Super Bowl just ended. Free agency's next month. The combine's at the end of this month. We got a lot of things to go over. But in looking at free agency and preparing for things, I started to go over the free agency classes that Omar Khan's brought in. You could say there's some hits. Isaac Seumalo certainly worked out when they brought him in 3 years ago. He's been a reliable guard. Aaron Rodgers worked for a couple years. You could say Deshaun Elliott's been a good signing. There's also been some busts. They tried to bring in Keanu Neal. That didn't work. They tried to bring in Darius Slay and Juan Thornhill. Both of those were disastrous picks. And there's other guys you could say, they worked for a time, like Russell Wilson, and Patrick Queen certainly been good, but not been the stellar player that they were hoping to get at linebacker. Where do you see this? Is this a problem for the system that the Steelers have been using to go get their free agents? If it's a problem of their own, or have they just been in not as opportunistic free agency pools to get the guys that they really need?
Well, I think there's a little bit of difference going on there. For one, I think they've hit on some really under the radar talents. You talk about Deshaun Elliott. I think I'd put Brandon Echols in there. Aaron Rodgers category, right? They've hit on some really good players. Kenny Gainwell certainly is a huge success story out of that. They've hit on some very solid under the radar players. They've also had this tendency, though, to dip into the pool of older players. You remember when Kevin Colbert was around, and you could basically look at any free agent over the age of 30 and be like, they're not signing that guy. Right. And one size doesn't always fit all. There's always productive players that are older than 30, but the Steelers have hired and signed guys that necessarily don't fit the profile of what they're looking for, or guys that are just over the hill in some respects. Darius Slay and Patrick Peterson and Keanu Neal, I think, all fit into that. The Steelers ask their guys in the secondary to do a lot of man-to-man coverage. Slay, for example, played a very heavy quarter scheme, so he played a lot of off-man coverage or zone coverage, so he wasn't exposed much in terms of the athleticism, the speed. He could utilize his eyes, his football IQ. Then he comes to the Steelers. He's asked to run a lot more cover 3. That was a little bit of a adventure, right? I think that's how you could put that. Patrick Peterson was the same way, just not the same athlete that he once was. And so that's kind of where I think a lot of these issues have come about, and things that have gone awry. So if one thing I would say I would like the Steelers to do less of is sign guys that are clearly starting to or are over the hill. That's identifiable. There are also, I think, some things, trade-wise. I know we're not just talking about, free agents, but trades. Yeah. The trades. Yeah. I mean, you look back on it a year later. Was the Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey for Minkah trade? Yeah. Was it really a successful trade? I mean, Jonnu part of it certainly wasn't. Jalen Ramsey, we'll see. I guess jury's still out on that part of it a little more. But was he as good as Minkah Fitzpatrick last year at free safety? I think a lot of the premise of that trade was made saying that Jalen Ramsey was going to be this do-it-all slot corner, and then you ended up with him at free safety anyways. And so a little bit of a weird trade. I think of some of the moves they made cheapening out at wide receiver. They didn't really sign a difference maker at wide receiver in the free agency market. Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, those guys never didn't necessarily work out. I do like some of the things they made on the margins, they certainly have found some under the radar guys like Ben Skowronek. I think that was a huge win in terms of identifying free agent. You think of someone like James Pierre, even they kept bringing him back. He was their own free agent, but clearly has emerged into something more. But you mentioned, I really think a lot of the issues, honestly, have been related to mostly signing guys in the secondary like that. When you look at the egregious misses from Omar Khan's tenure, I think a lot of them come there. I think that they need to really look at how they evaluate that position, especially among veterans. You need to have athletes there if you're going to run a lot of man-to-man. Now, they're going to run a different scheme this year probably in terms of just coverage profiles, so that'll be a little different. But that's where I think he ran into guys getting third and even fourth contract in the NFL. That was where I thought he ran into some trouble. Patrick Queen, I mean, that one is certainly out in kind of contention still. We'll see where that goes. I'm expecting him to be back for a third year, but I certainly think that there are things that they can do better in the evaluation process in terms of looking at durability, fit, athleticism, profiles to the scheme that could certainly fit better rather than just throwing holes at guys. Trying to take on a marquee name, for example, just because he's a veteran and they think that he can bring something of that sort. Sometimes it is okay to go with a little bit more youth, even if, these guys like 27 and maybe isn't the profile of a Darius Slay. They certainly could have gone after some younger corners this year, for example. They didn't have to sign Darius Slay. I understand that they were trying not to mess with the compensatory pick formula, but there were certainly better options out there. So that's probably one of my big things is I'd start to slant younger with some of these signings rather than going out and getting a 34-year-old Darius Slay, for example.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. I think that there's times where, like, hey, if a certain signing can work, you can say, like, hey, if that guy is a unique spot there, like, Calais Campbell has been a guy that has been a free agent, old guy that you can bring around. But again, that's defensive line. Typically, older guys can last longer at defensive line. Look at Cam Hayward. But I'm kind of with you on the potential for like the Steelers to get they need to get guys who are going to be more like coming off their first contract, or like guys who maybe they had a bad injury that cut short their second contract and they're looking to take a step up and they had some good time in the NFL. There's guys like that, but hey, again, part of this is the market, right? Like everyone else is gunning for those players too. Like if the Steelers, we talked with Alan Saunders about this yesterday, but if the Steelers were to upgrade at wide receiver, be nice to get Alec Pierce and a really good rookie, right, to pair with DK Metcalf, and then that could be a really good setup for what Mike McCarthy wants to do with the passing game. You could try to look at other guys that look around the league and say, hey, who can we get of value who just this team over here couldn't afford, and because there's always that team that has the abundance of athletes that hey, we just couldn't pay this guy over here because we're paying these guys over here, but then again, everyone's looking at those players. So that's where it's not an easy thing, but it's something that they got to get, that I think they do have to get better, and they do have to at least hit a little bit more this off season in this period.
Yeah, I mean, I look at some of the guys they have signed that have been real hits, and it have been guys that maybe were underutilized elsewhere, but they saw a specific vision for what they did. And I think of Deshaun Elliott, I think of Brandon Echols, I think of Kenneth Gainwell. Those three stick out to me as, man, this is the type of signing really good teams make. You see, like the Eagles, for example, when they won a Super Bowl, they signed Zach Bond for pennies, convert him to off-ball linebacker from a pass rusher. He's an all-pro, right? There's just ways you can sign guys. There are really good players out there that sometimes don't get utilized to their fullest extent in their first stop, sometimes even their second stop. And the Steelers clearly utilized Kenneth Gainwell better than Philadelphia did, and Philadelphia didn't have to use him more because they had Saquon Barkley, but the Steelers didn't. And it clearly was good scouting on their part to find a guy like that. They need to find guys like that. You know what I mean? And I think that there are some other moves that, the Patrick Queen thing, there were other questions about him, but it's rare to find really high-level athletic inside linebacker play in the league right now. We're kind of having a shortage of good linebackers, to be quite honest with you, which makes a guy like Patrick Queen even valuable. So he's valuable just on what he can do alone at his highs, even though he certainly has lows. And so to me, the profile of guy that they need to look at are along those lines, at some point. I could also think, of some maybe extensions that didn't work out. And, I think of like Larry Ogunjobi. That didn't work out for them. The injury profile. Obviously, the Deontay Johnson extension didn't really work out for them, and that was a personality clash. And so there's always different things. Quarterback's an entirely different story. They've kind of been playing the game with that, right? It's kind of been a nickel and dime situation. You're not generally going to find high-level quarterback play in free agency, but they could have signed Sam Darnold. They didn't. They opted for Aaron Rodgers. So that's something to think about too. But really, in general, Chris, my issue is that they are signing, in my opinion, too many guys that are over the hill and too many guys like Jonnu Smith who are either redundant or just don't fit the team. They didn't need a Jonnu Smith. That was a thing. He didn't need – that was pointed out by many people. That's not revisionist history. I think multiple of us were talking about that. I remember I was talking to Connor Hayward last year at minicamp, and he said basically the same thing. It's one of the most honest quotes I've ever gotten out of a player that – Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith are very redundant players. It's probably going to lead to a logjam that would be worse off for everyone else. Like, there are things about that. So I think they need to do a better job of evaluating fit within the roster and the scheme, but also stop signing so many over-the-hill guys.
Yeah, certainly something to do there. And speaking of over the hill, they're talking about bringing back Aaron Rodgers. I want to talk about him next here. And could the Steelers find their own Sam Darnold this year in free agency? We'll talk about that and get to more grades. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you this show is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. Well, when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, you got to trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored job, put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need, real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. That's Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, back here on the show. Let's keep it moving here. Nick, we're hearing more and more buzz about how Aaron Rodgers is just invigorated by his year with the Steelers, and he's not done, and he feels completely different than he did at the end of last year, finishing up with the Jets, and that he feels really good about returning to the Steelers. And there's that joke that we've said as soon as the Steelers hired Mike McCarthy and the Steelers were like, we didn't hire him to bring back Aaron Rodgers, but they probably are going to bring back Aaron Rodgers. Is it lining up to a point where how sure are you that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the Steelers starting quarterback in 2026?
Is Aaron Rodgers a hell of a guy?
Is he a hell of a guy?
Is he a hell of a guy? I think Rodgers, I feel, generally speaking, I feel pretty confident he's going to be the quarterback next year. I think things line up. The open line of communication he's had with them. If he wasn't going to play, he would just shut down, go dark, or tell Mike McCarthy, sorry, man, I'm not coming back. I think things are slipping that way to Aaron Rodgers returning. I think this time the Steelers need an answer much sooner. I don't think they're going to wait till June for him. I think they need it by free agency. Hey, are you coming back or not? And I don't think Rodgers is going to have to wait as long either. So that I think will be kind of the thing. I think we'll probably know. I mean, I won't be surprised if we come out of the combine with a pretty clear picture of if he's going to come back or not. So I think things are trending that way. I think it lines up. He's talked many times since his time in Green Bay about how much fonder he has grown from Mike McCarthy since they kind of split in 2018 when McCarthy was canned, that he really respects Mike McCarthy. They are still close. And And I know that there were a few Jets reporters that put out that if Aaron Rodgers was going to go anywhere, that playing for Mike McCarthy again was something he really wanted to do. The opportunity is right here. And I mean, listen, they wouldn't have to really overturn the scheme a lot. Aaron Rodgers, when he installed some of the stuff that he really likes to do, took some old West Coast Mike McCarthy offense and injected it into Arthur Smith's scheme. So they would keep some of the core concepts there. He kind of fits what they want to. Mike McCarthy gives unprecedented freedom at the line of scrimmage to his quarterback. Obviously, Rodgers loves the freedom at the line of scrimmage. He can run that operation. I'm feeling pretty confident that he will end up being back, just given the tea leaves I'm reading.
I feel you on that. I also kind of think it's pointing in that direction for sure. I think the question here, though, is should it point that direction, or should the Steelers be looking for their own version of Sam Darnold? Because, I mean, again, Sam Darnold was not, he's a Super Bowl champion now, but he was not some superstar guy. Like when the Seahawks got him, I think several people were like, man, the Seahawks are really bugging out. You're getting rid of Geno Smith and bringing in this guy, a guy who's been bouncing around the league. This is his fifth team. And then he fit exactly the way that they needed him to fit. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't the best player on the team. He wasn't, but he was the right kind of quarterback for a team that was dominating the trenches, had a dominant defense, could run the ball, had some really good weapons to throw to, and he made it work. And so, I look at a guy that could be around his age, late 20s, could be looking for another chance, has some good track record of recent history. And there's two guys that that come to the front very obviously. There's the one we've talked about a lot. There's Malik Willis with the Packers. He's been a backup. He's been a guy floating there, but he's 27 years old. He's a guy that people look at for his mobility. He's gotten better. His mechanics have gotten better. He looks like he can see the field. But then there's also a guy that Steelers faced last year, and that's Daniel Jones. He's 29 years old. It looks like the Colts will try to bring him back, but officially he's a free agent at this very second. But would the Steelers benefit from going with one of those guys over Aaron Rodgers? And would it be a mistake to try to do the Aaron Rodgers route again? Because there's a lot of Steelers fans, Nick. Every time when I bring up the Aaron Rodgers thing, and they're probably typing in their comment section right now here on this video, they're like, Chris, I'm tired of it. I can't do another year of Aaron Rodgers, man. I want my quarterback. And I feel the pain. The Steelers have had a different but here's the other thing. The Steelers have had a different quarterback every year since Ben Roethlisberger's last year. And at least Aaron Rodgers will give you stability from last year to this year and give you one more year of saying, hey, the draft, the next draft is it. But again, going back to should they be really gunning for one of these guys in the free agent field?
Personally, I think yes. Listen, Rodgers is going to give them a certain high floor level of play. That play is not going to bottom out. It's not going to be bottom 5 QB play. So the Steelers are going to probably be competitive with him. They want to win every single year, and they want to be relevant in the playoff picture. He will do that. That is their goal right now. The Steelers, though, I think should have a little bit more ambition there. I understand the argument to bring in Rodgers. Okay, you have the stability. He'll be able to mentor Will Howard plus any other young guy you might bring in. The offense knows him. The guys like him in that locker room. I will say that's one thing I think Aaron Rodgers is really liked in the Steelers locker room. I think the guys really like him a lot. So I understand that argument. But there's also this argument to me of what does bringing back 42, soon to be 43-year-old Aaron Rodgers get you long term? Yeah. And I'm not sure I see a ton of gain for it. And to me, you should be taking shots at a Malik Willis. Daniel Jones, I think he is destined to go back. I'd even throw a guy like Mac Jones in there. I know he's going to be more of a trade candidate. He's a backup right now with San Francisco, but he could be someone. He fits the profile of a Darnold. And it's not only been Darnold. Baker Mayfield has done this. Geno Smith himself was this, where, the second win, boom, there they go. We're going to see more and more Sam Darnolds, Chris, because the league has never been more impatient in quarterback play and development right now. There's going to be more and more of these guys on second and third teams catching a second wind. And Malik Willis, he could completely stink. I mean, he could. We've only seen a very short snapshot of gameplay from Malik Willis. We have not seen the extended play. We've not seen a defense and how they adjust to him over a season. We've not seen that. But I also think there's an upside play there. But Sam Darnold was unique in the fact that he quarterbacked a 14-3 football team the year before. he went to Seattle. It wasn't like he had just walked in as a backup. He was a 14-3 starter for a playoff team. And so there's not a profile of that type this year to me. So to me, I would look more in the long term. I would try and go for a guy like Malik Willis. I would try and go for a guy in that vein. But the Steelers, I think, are going to bring back Aaron Rodgers because he gives them a high floor. He gives them a lot of certain qualities that they're going to like, the mentorship, the high football IQ. He's going to teach guys a lot of things. I mean, how many stories have we already seen? We're only a month out from the season of guys that have learned something from Aaron Rodgers. That is valuable. So if you're going to sign a veteran, at least sign someone like that, I can see the kind of argument for that. But I also think at some point, Chris, you need to take a swing for the long term rather than the short term. And I do think bringing Aaron Rodgers back for a second year, a little too short term focused for my liking personally.
Listen, I feel you on that. It's the short term, but the thing that I kind of go back and forth with Alan Saunders on is he also just the best option right now? Like, is investing in the short term just what you need until you get to a point where there is a better pool of guys to take a shot at? Because let's also face it. Most teams get the quarterback pick wrong, whether it's free agency or the draft. Most teams get it wrong. They get a guy that, maybe he gives them a couple of years of good years, but he's not the guy. The Seahawks certainly took their stabs until they found Sam Darnold to fit. And so it makes me wonder if the Steelers are saying just, hey, you know what? We don't like this pool of guys. We're gonna do this. I mean, even when they brought in Russell Wilson, they were doing it to kind of give themselves, okay, let's get a new veteran face for this offense. Let's see what he does. We'll see if Kenny holds on. Whoop, Kenny don't want to be here anymore. Let's bring in Justin Fields, and then we have our 1-2 punch. Neither of those guys work out. All right, let's spin it again. They're clearly not making any long-term commitments because they don't see anyone that they should be making a long-term commitment with. But again, to your point, the Seahawks certainly just struck with that with Sam Darnold, and I think it's a question of what they should be doing moving forward right now.
To the Steelers' I don't want to say credit, but to their mindset, Plan A last year was Justin Fields. Do not forget that he ended up going to New York.
It's a good point
because they gave him multi-years, they gave him more money, all these things. The Steelers basically were trying the Darnold route. The Jets tried the Darnold route, and they tried and said, Justin Fields on his third team, maybe this thing could be different. It wasn't, but that was the idea, right? And the Steelers were kind of going in that. It would have been stability. It would have been a young guy with upside. The long-term process was in their mind there. They brought in Aaron Rodgers because he was stability. He was a great mentor. He had all these intangible qualities. Is there a guy that they look at similar to Justin Fields right now? And that's got really the question, I guess. How much do you really believe in Malik Willis? Because he is the only guy with that specific profile, you're going to see Arizona, Miami, maybe Cleveland. You're going to see all these different teams that are in quarterback spots try and get him, because there's also, on top of this is where the QB class comes in. It's Fernando Mendoza, big gap, Ty Simpson, big gap in the rest of the field, right? It is very barren. And so you're going to see teams try and get Malik Willis. You're probably going to see a team try and trade a third-round pick for Mac Jones. Like, that's just going to be what it's – someone's going to talk themselves probably into fixing Tua and Kyler Murray. Like, that's going to be probably what happens. Someone's going to do all these things. In the same name, they're going to look at and say, Sam Darnold did it. We can do it. And so you are throwing darts. But it is the quarterback position. It's the most important position in football. And so throwing darts at it until you get it is kind of what you have to do, because if one of those darts hits, it changes the trajectory of your franchise.
Right. And I think the thing here is make your darts calculated and make it so that they don't come back and to bite you, because, here's the other thing. You could throw a dart that sets you back 4 years because you keep missing there. So I think that there's certainly both sides to that argument. I don't know if the guys in this group to be the Sam Darnold for the Steelers, if you will. I like Malik Willis. I was impressed by what Daniel Jones did with the Colts this year. But again, as I noted at the time, I was like, man, that O-line and that run game is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Will that be available in Pittsburgh? Who knows? But I certainly think that there's a lot the Steelers need to do. Quarterback won't. I just don't think the answer to solve everything at quarterback is available right now. And maybe that's what they're holding out for. But I want to talk more about how this team can build as we go throughout the rest of this offseason, because to me, the quarterback, it's certainly a big piece, and it's the biggest piece they need to solve long term. But we just saw the Seahawks, Sam Darnold was their quarterback, but he was not the engine of that team. It was very much the defense, all the picks, all the moves that they made while they were moving around, figuring out what they were going to do at quarterback. And I want to talk about the Steelers edge rushers next, because that's who we're going to give our final stars and skulls grades for. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off, speed skating races decided by inches. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. We continue our rollout of guys here, rolling out all of our final stars and skulls grades for the year. A reminder, if you've been following us all season long, you saw every Tuesday we'd come out with our grades after we looked at the All-22 film. We gave stars and skulls, 1 to 3 stars for good to elite play, 1 to 3 skulls for bad to all-time terrible play, and then, of course, the dreaded bus ticket grades that are out there for the worst of the worst. But let's turn to the Steelers edge rushers. We did the inside linebackers early this week. We did the defensive linemen yesterday with Alan Saunders. So I want to do edge rushers with Nick Farabaugh, because I think there's also some interesting questions with how the Steelers handle this group free agency wise and otherwise moving forward. Let's address one of the lighter ones, or the lightest one of the group. That's Jeremiah Moon. They brought him in for reserve. Nothing really to note of big impact. 0 stars, 1 skull, but really only came in for a couple games. C- grade on the year. Not not anything superior to what you asked for. He was the guy they brought in when injuries started to mount for them. So nothing really to mark against him. That was fine. But I will say, Nick, the rookie that came to this group, Jack Sawyer, he's who we get next year. I was impressed by him on the year. He had 7 stars, 2 skulls. That's good enough for a C+, but for an edge rusher who's a 4th round rookie, that's pretty doggone good. And the Steelers, maybe did they hit twice? Because they certainly hit with Nick Herbig in the 4th round a couple years back. Is this another guy who they should be planning on keeping and seeing how he develops?
It's interesting because he is not the same level of athlete Herbig is. He's a different player.
Right.
But he is super high character. He's super intense. The motor on him is absolutely insane. He just never gives up, man. He continues. He's a relentless player. And I thought his technique really came along from his time at Ohio State. Now I thought he was able to win a little bit more fluidly with power. He's never going to be a great speed rusher, but if he can corner that edge and at least make it somewhat of a threat, I mean, he can be a solid rotational rusher. And he was this year. He was a ball player. He was ball searching everywhere, right? He had strip sacks and picks and all these different things. He was a big play magnet when he was out there, and he's a good run defender. So, I mean, he was a very solid, very good 4th edge rusher. We'll see if he can develop more than that. But, man, I thought he had a really good year to start this off. A 4th round edge rusher, you really don't usually get much out of those guys as rookies. I thought the Steelers got pretty decent production out of them.
Speaking of 4th round edge rushers, another guy who did well this year was Nick Herbig. He didn't get no C+, though. We gave him a solid B, 18 stars, just 3 skulls on the year. And I feel like he would have had more, Nick, if they used him a bit more. And look, I'm one of the first people that says, look, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, there's some bad dudes. You don't want to take them off the field. But maybe they needed to find some way to make sure that Nick Herbig got more snaps, because he made a difference this year. And one thing I noted from, especially in the second half of the season, I really felt that when Nick Herbig was playing, I thought his biggest issue coming into this season was the run. When offensive linemen were crashing down on him, he didn't know what to do with him because he's just not big enough. But this year, I saw times where he would dip his shoulder and then just I'm going to spin around you. Now you missed your block and I'm still here in this gap. He found so many unique ways to win there that I'm like, there's something special about this guy. So I gave him a B grade. What's your thoughts on Nick Herbig? And also the question of, he's in the last year of his deal. supposedly there's rumors out there that he wants to be a starter next year and he wants to be traded if he's not. I don't know if that's true. But what do the Steelers do with Nick Herbig this year?
I mean, he's their young up-and-coming guy. I think if he plays a full season as a starter, quite frankly, I think he's a star. I truly think he's a star. And it would be, I think, organizational malpractice to let him walk out the door. I just think that, truly. What you get with him is you get an explosive cannon, and that is exactly what he is. He's undersized, sure, but the way he wins, I mean, he wins so quickly sometimes, Chris. It doesn't matter if you're getting the ball out in 2.5 seconds. He's already there. Like, you just don't see guys with that type of explosive twitch and the ability to bend like he does very often. And I thought he took a huge leap as a run defender this year, as you mentioned. He's becoming a more complete player. If he's here next year, which I would expect he is, they really need to lean into him being a far bigger part of their rotation. I just, him playing 18 snaps on some games. I mean, we're talking about a guy here that can take some of the tax off Alex Highsmith, right? Like, you don't want those guys to get buried into the sand. TJ Watt is entering, what's he going to be, 31 or 32 this next year?
Yeah.
Why is this guy playing 90% of the snaps? I get TJ Watt, still a very good player, but he doesn't need to be playing 90% of the snaps. Let's save TJ Watt a little bit, and TJ Watt will probably look better when the fourth quarter comes. You need him in those nitty-gritty situations. I also think they could lean more into his off-ball linebacker skills. I think Herbig, every time he goes off-ball, he looks fluid in coverage. He looks very smart. He's very, very loose in the hips. There's a lot of potential there. Remember, coming out of Wisconsin, people thought he would be an off-ball linebacker potentially. Moving full-time off-ball, but you could lean into that with the 3 outside linebacker package a little bit. So they need to get this guy on the football field more. I think he's a star. He's a starter for, I would say, at least over half the league, maybe more. This is a guy that's really good. So you got to keep him around, man. He's a cornerstone piece. You just don't find good pass rushers like this very often, let alone when they got him in the 4th round.
I feel like if they were able, with the situation that they have at quarterback right now, they don't have their long-term guy, and they have money to burn right now. This is one of the areas I would burn it. Like, look, yes, you're going to be paying 3 edge rushers big money, but this is a dude you want to keep around, because when Nick Herbig, like, he enters his prime, that's when TJ Watt's going to be gone. And I think that's the thing here, is that you have a chance to have a deadly 3-man edge rusher combo to build with for the future and to stack up. And then whenever TJ Watt ages out or Alex Highsmith ages out or whatever happens, Nick Herbig can be the guy there. And then you can have, if Sawyer continues to develop, he's another guy in the picture. If you draft another guy, Nick Herbig can be a big piece of the passing on what they have now, which is a really good duo into the future with carrying them up. And going into that duo, Alex Highsmith's grades on the year, 21 stars, just 2 skulls, good enough for a B+ grade, just missed getting the A. But Nick, I look at Alex Highsmith, and I was really impressed by what I saw this year from him as well. Granted, he had injuries, but man, when he was playing, when he was playing, I felt him in the run, I felt him in the pass, led the team with 9.5 sacks. I think he took a step forward. There's a chance that he could be the team's best edge rusher next season.
I mean, he maybe was this year.
Yeah.
Dude, what he did down the stretch was so impressive. I thought his stretch run after he returned from his pec injury, I thought he was unbelievable. And a lot of that, he was the Batman, right? He's always been the Robin to TJ.
Yeah.
Man, he was the guy. And he was dominant in a lot of those games. He was unblockable. It got to the point for when TJ came back against the Texans, they started chipping Alex. Like, that's what it got to. That Detroit game, he completely took over that game against Taylor Decker. He was taking over games against good offensive tackles. The Baltimore games, Ronnie Stanley has nightmares of Alex Highsmith. I'm telling you, he's going to. He was dominant in a few of those games. Alex Highsmith was unbelievable this year when he was healthy. That's the key. Can he be healthy? He missed time with the high ankle. He missed time with the pec. If this guy can stay healthy, if they can get 17 games out of Alex Highsmith, he will have, man, I think he'll have 15-ish sacks, honestly, up there. They just need him on the field. And as long as he's on the field, he is a difference maker.
Looking at how I graded him from week to week, when he after the Buffalo game from Baltimore on, here were his grades. At Baltimore, 3 stars. At home against the Dolphins, 2 stars. At the Lions, 3 stars. At the Browns, 3 stars. At the versus the Ravens in the finale, 2 stars. And he did get a skull grade in the playoff game because he kind of got shut out of that one. But I mean, that's ending the year with 5 straight games of 2 and 3 stars, 3-star performances. That's not when I do these grades. I do the stars and skulls because it's a different way to make it different, make it unique, so that it's a staple for the show and my work with the Post Gazette. But like when you have a 2-star, if someone had a 2-star game every game of the year, that's an all pro. That's like, and that's the level he was playing in that like month plus stretch at the end of the regular season. A big reason why this team made the playoffs and won the AFC North this year. And to your point, maybe he was the best edge rusher on the team. And here's the other thing to kind of look at it here. He had basically the same grade as TJ Watt, who finished the year with 22 stars, 3 skulls, good enough also for a B+. And if you look at it, yes, just 1 more star and 1 more skull than Alex Highsmith. So the same difference between those two. And listen, I know a lot of people are down on TJ Watt because he wasn't the defensive player of the year candidate that he's been for most of his career. And listen, yeah, that had a huge impact on the team. You know, if he was 22 and a half sack TJ Watt, this team probably gets 11, 12 wins this year. Maybe they beat the Texans. But he's not, and that stinks. But just because he's not supreme superstar unstoppable man TJ Watt doesn't mean he's now a bad player. He's still a very, very good player. And I mean, looking at his stretch this year, he had 3-star performances against the Patriots, the Vikings, the Bears. They gave him 2 stars. The Ravens the first time, and he had a 2-star performance against the Ravens the second time. The Bears and the Browns the first time. He's still a dominant player at his position. He just wasn't the guy that's taken over every single game that he was over the past 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the price tag on his contract definitely affects how people view him. I get that, right? $41 million a year. That's a lot of money. But here's the thing about TJ. I feel like we're at a crossroads with TJ Watt's career because I don't think he's been such a dominant speed rusher that has won with his burst and his ability to bend. He uses that cross chop rip to dip around the edge, and no one's really been able to defend it for years. The explosiveness is going to wane as he gets older. I think we're going to start to see a new version of TJ Watt. How about TJ Watt, the power rusher? That's, I think, going to be the next step of his career, the evolution of his career. His brother did it. Granted, he did it on the interior, but that's where TJ Watt's going to go next. He might bulk up a little bit, and he might get a little bit more muscular, and that might be what he needs. But that's really the next step of his career, because you look at older edge rushers that have been great late into their 30s, mid-30s. I look at guys like Terrell Suggs. I look at guys like Khalil Mack. They were power rushers. And Khalil Mack did this exact thing. He was a dominant speed rusher early in his career. Yeah, he had the power rush part of his game. It was underlying. And then TJ Watt, you look at him, been a speed rusher for a long time, man. Can the power rusher part come out? And TJ Watt has shown flashes of it. That'll be the key thing. So we're going to see where he goes. This year, I thought he was pretty good. He got all the attention, obviously, whenever teams played him. He got so many chips. He got so many doubles. He got slides his way. He got reduced splits to try and get him off his path. He certainly is the one that opens up things for a lot of others. He gave Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig a ton of one-on-ones, for example, on the other side. And then when there were some teams this year, I thought it was funny, Chris, where in the middle of the year when Herbig was really going off and then Highsmith later in the year before TJ got hurt, there were some teams that were like, let's just see. Maybe TJ Watt isn't TJ Watt anymore. They would leave him one-on-one, and the next 2 plays, it'd be like, oh, there he is. There's TJ Watt again. Can't leave TJ Watt one-on-one still. I did think one of the things about TJ was I thought he was really good as a run defender this year. I thought he was a huge force as a run defender. There were times when teams really tried to test him, and I thought they got really rebuked to that side. And so he brings different qualities than maybe he did at his height. And I think we're going to see an evolution of TJ Watt as we go into this. He's relentless in training. He looks at every little cutting edge thing he could ever look at. And I'll say this, it's pretty good to have a mentor being JJ Watt. And TJ and JJ are very close, obviously, as brothers, but a lot of what TJ does is modeled after what his brother did. And his brother became a great power rusher later in his career. That's probably what TJ Watt's going to look at now. And by the way, look up Khalil Mack's career stats late in his career. He's still going. We'll see if he plays. But Khalil Mack had pretty good seasons in his 30s. We'll see if TJ Watt can replicate that. But I think that's the route he goes.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how he tries to change things up. We're way over our time here, so Ross, please don't be mad at me and Nick for going over our time. But Nick, thanks for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. The people that can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh FB. Make sure to check out my stuff at PennLive.com/Steelers and check out the YouTube channel, Steelers Blitz on PennLive.
All right. Thank you, Nick, so much for joining us. As always, I'm Chris Carter, your host here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle is always at Carter Critiques. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Back here tomorrow with more on the Locked On Steelers podcast.